The 1970s were a golden age for rock, a time when groundbreaking bands carved their place in music history and defined an entire generation. But as the 1980s dawned, a new sound began to dominate the airwaves: hair metal. With its infectious hooks, over-the-top glam, and electrifying energy, this new wave was impossible to ignore. As the decade unfolded, some of rock's biggest names from the 70s found themselves at a crossroads, forced to reinvent their sound to keep up with the times. What followed was the unexpected and often surprising transition of classic rock legends diving headfirst into the glitzy world of hair metal. Now, as a note, I don't like the term hair metal. You know, I defend 80s hard rock heavy metal, and, you know, the hairspray and everything, that was just part of the look. I think hair metal is an insult, just like I think yacht rock actually is an insult to that genre of music. But, all right, let's continue on. From updating their image to embracing the iconic riffs and flashy style of the era, these bands pushed musical boundaries and proved they could evolve without losing their edge. The results were sometimes divisive, but always unforgettable. So here we are, the 10 best hair metal albums by non-hair metal bands. Some bands did not fit the hair metal mode, but played along convincingly enough for at least one album. Starting off with Kiss, Crazy Nights from 1987. Although Kiss weren't strangers to glitz and glam, considering they made a career off wearing sequin jumpsuits, 7-inch heels, makeup, and wigs, they were indeed strangers to the hair metal genre. Kiss had long since foregone the original lineup years prior, and took off their iconic makeup with the release of 1983's Lick It Up. But other than the album's title track, the album didn't have much success. Their subsequent albums, 1984 Animalize, 1985's Asylum, had similar fates. Although 1987's Crazy Nights didn't take off like a rocket either, it repackaged Kiss for a new audience. I'm not quite sure I'm getting this, to be honest, because I would go back to Asylum. Was way more. I mean, if you look at the video for Who Wants to Be Lonely, I mean, Paul Stanley's wearing like neon gloves and a neon long jacket, and yeah, I think this is a miss. I think they really embraced the kind of hair metal thing really coming up on Animalize. Maybe Lick It Up was the transition, but it was definitely Animalize. But anyway, we'll continue forward. Visually, Kiss leaned into the era's glam style, shedding their iconic stage personas and adopting a more youthful, glam-inspired look. With their flashy outfits and hair teased to perfection, they mirrored the larger-than-life image of hair metal icons in Motley Crue and Bon Jovi. Though Crazy Nights wasn't as commercially successful as some of their earlier albums, it still showcased the band's signature energy and passion. The album's sleek production and anthemic sound highlighted a new phase for Kiss while keeping the bold spirit that made them icons. And I really like Crazy Nights. I know one of the songs that got a hard time was I'll Fight Hell to Hold You, the Paul Stanley track, but I thought there were some really great moments on Crazy Nights. You, of course, had the title track and the other single, Reason to Live. But the album as a whole, that's where Gene, I think that's the album where Paul really went to Gene and said, hey, look, man, it's either the band or your acting and everything else that you're doing. And really, Gene kind of came back into the fold and did some of his best work, I believe, not only on Crazy Nights, but also on the follow-up, Hot in the Shade. So here we go to our next one, Alice Cooper, Trash. Yeah, this was a surprising album for me. Alice had kind of gotten over his alcoholism, and his two previous albums, Constrictor and Raise Your Fist, were very heavy metal. But Alice really is an innovator, or you can kind of say sometimes a follower in innovation, whereas, you know, he did the classic rock thing, and he came back with Constrictor, which was very heavy metal, and Raise Your Fist and Yell, which to me to this day is probably my favorite Alice Cooper album. I mean, it's his heaviest album. It's got some great moments on there. The title track, of course, is fantastic, but like Prince of Darkness, Roses on White Lace, terrific album. Trash, well, I'm sure they're going to get into it, but there was some Trash is kind of a goofy album. I mean, you got Bon Jovi doing backup vocals, if that tells you anything. Alice Cooper, Trash, the godfather of shock rock, is, dare we say, one of the most well-adapted artists on this list. From his start working alongside artists such as The Doors and Frank Zappa in Los Angeles in the 1960s, Alice Cooper has managed to transcend a slew of rock and roll genres while managing to help innovate and coin his own shock rock. From good old-fashioned hard rock to industrial metal and everything in between, Cooper found a way to remain unique and authentic while simultaneously acclimating to the times. In the mid-1980s, a newly sober Cooper arrived back on the scene, fully embracing the rock world's newfound metal edge. This brought the release of Constrictor in 1986 and Raise Your Fist and Yell in 1987, which unfortunately never fully reached mainstream popularity. No, they didn't, but excellent, excellent albums. This all changed in 1989 when Coop teamed up with Bon Jovi and Aerosmith hit doctor Desmond Child to conquer the hair metal scene with the release of Trash on Epic Records. The album gave Cooper the track Poison, which became Cooper's first top 10 hit in well over a decade, and that song still resonates. I mean, Poison, I probably hear that in Schools Out on classic rock radio more than any other songs of his. Alice Cooper's ability to evolve while staying true to his identity is a testament to his lasting influence in rock. With Trash, he embraced the glam metal era, introducing his signature shock rock to the generation. The success of Poison marked his return to mainstream success, proving that Cooper could adapt without compromising his rebellious spirit. His career shows that no matter the era, rock has always had a place for those bold enough to reinvent themselves. Coming with Def Leppard, Hysteria. My God, one of the biggest albums of, if not the biggest album of 87, definitely one of the biggest albums of the decade. And they're not hair metal, really? I mean, well, I guess if you come out hair metal, then you're hair metal. Like Bon Jovi came out hair metal, Poison came out hair metal. Def Leppard just started as a good hard rock band out of the UK. Def Leppard's Hysteria in 1987, while Def Leppard's anthem, Pour Some Sugar on Me, has undeniably become one of the signature tracks of the glam metal era, the Sheffield-born band never set out to be the poster child for the genre. In fact, their roots trace back to a raw, rebellious energy of the new wave of British heavy metal, and indeed it does, especially on Through the Night and High and Dry. Drawing inspiration from legendary rock giants Deep Purple and Mott the Hoople, long before they became icons of hair metal. The band began working with legendary producer Robert Mutt Lange, best known for his work on AC/DC's historic Back in Black on 1981's High and Dry. Lange guided the band and molded them into what would become a memorable, melodic, hard rock style that garnered the band's success for the first half of the 1980s. After a slew of tragic events, including the fateful accident that took the drummer Rick Allen's arm, the band took their time in crafting what would become 1987's Hysteria. And what a phenomenal album it turned out to be. 7 singles off of that album, all of them charting. Now, in the United States, our first single was Women. Over in the UK, the first single was actually Animal. But what a tremendously brilliant album. I mean, I can't say enough about it. And I bought it. That album came out the same day as Dio's Dream Evil. I went to the local record store, picked them both up. And as much as I love Dio, Hysteria was infectious. And I kept listening to it over and over and over again. And still love the album to this day. Coming in with Scorpions, Savage Amusement. And love it or hate it, my favorite Scorpions album. I think that is the only album I can say by the Scorpions that is perfection from beginning to end. Released in April of 1988, Savage Amusement was Scorpions' ode to the glam metal movement. Although the group never shied away from a hefty dose of melody and hard rock riffage in any of their previous releases, especially in the 1980s, they embraced the LA scene more than ever with their 10th album. And they did, and it's a fantastic album. But to be fair, when you look where the Scorpions were in their early days with Uli John Roth and everything, and they came up, with Rainbow and Entrance and Virgin Killer, when they made that shift, and of course the first couple albums out where we get Love Drive, we get Animal Magnetism, they were already kind of shifting their sound to a kind of heavier sound, kind of bolder sound, really in the style of Deep Purple and stuff. And it really came together on their album Blackout, and with the big single No One Like You, and blossomed. So at least for me, when I listen to Love Drive, going into Animal Magnetism, to Blackout, to Love It for Sting, Savage Amusement really is the organic next step. It doesn't sound contrived. It doesn't sound like it came out of nowhere. It sounds like the next step. And to me, it is the peak of that kind of second wave Scorpions. But anyway, that's just me. Despite being viewed as a weaker effort due to fans' distaste of the band's original 70s rock edge being traded in for a more contemporary sound, Savage Amusement gave the band one of their most memorable tracks, such as the ever-so-catchy Rhythm of Love and Don't Stop at the Top. Will Savage Amusement go down in hard rock and heavy metal history as one of the band's most iconic releases? Unfortunately, no, but it will prove that the Scorpions, a band that made its debut in 1965, could still release an album that made the top 10 on the Billboard charts 20 years later. And that's just it. There's these remasters that came out from the Scorpions in the last few years celebrating 50 years of the Scorpions. Think about that. Half a decade of hard rock and heavy metal from this band out of Germany. Absolutely amazing. We move on to the Whitesnake 1980, or as it's known as Whitesnake 87. But Whitesnake 1987, the album that broke Whitesnake in the United States. Despite the fact that Whitesnake seemed to be known for David Coverdale's Bleach Blonde, locked, sensual power ballads, and Tawny Kitaen dancing across your television screen on the hood of a Jaguar, things certainly didn't start that way. The English rock band Whitesnake, based off David Coverdale's solo album of the same name, came to fruition in 1978 after Coverdale's departure from Deep Purple. The band was never truly meant to stand the test of time, as it was Coverdale's initial intention to use the band for a kind of one-off promotional tour for his 78 solo record, North Winds. Of course, this was only the beginning. Whitesnake went on to develop into something much greater, combining elements of soul, funk, and blues, much different than the hair metal sound Whitesnake seems to be often pegged for. 6 years and 6 albums later, Coverdale finally made the decision to steer the band into a direction more versed in hard rock, thus resulting in the release of 1984's Slide It In and the introduction of the late, great John Sykes. As times evolved, so did Whitesnake. They traded in the blues for melodic hard rock edge that eventually went on to give birth to the sleazy, guitar-heavy tracks that we've come to know and love. And yeah, that went on. We had Whitesnake 87. A couple of years later, we had Slip of the Tongue. And then, of course, everything sort of transitioned. And we get Restless Heart, which was really kind of dialing back. I think David had his taste of that. And in subsequent albums in the last, I would say, the last 15 to 20 years, when you have Forevermore, Good to Be Bad, you actually have a really nice amalgamation of early and latter-day Whitesnake. And we move on to The Ultimate Sin, Ozzy Osbourne. Yeah, Ozzy did go glam for this. And only for this. Only for this, you know. You look at the previous album, Bark at the Moon, he looks like Ozzy. You look at the following album, No Rest for the Wicked, he looks like Ozzy. But in this, he's wearing the glam spangled stuff, especially when you see him in the video for Shot in the Dark. Ozzy Osbourne, The Ultimate Sin. Even though I know there's going to be some readers who disagree heavily with Ozzy Osbourne being featured on this list, for better or for worse, there's no denying that the Prince of Darkness catered to the times and had a hair metal era of his own. Maybe not in music, but definitely in that one video. The Ultimate Sin, released in 1986, introduced us to Ozzy's Bleach Blonde, Aquanet teased mane, bedazzled capes, and even more guy liner than normal. The album's biggest single, Shot in the Dark, and the title track boasted videos added into regular rotation on MTV and could be seen alongside Rat's Round and Round or Motley Crue's Looks That Kill. The album was primarily written by guitarist Jakey Lee, who teamed up with Ozzy Osbourne in his previous release, Bark at the Moon. Tracks such as Shot in the Dark, authored by bassist Phil Sassoon, and The Ultimate Sin deliver infectious riffs and catchy vocal lines that perfectly fit within the glam metal framework, which prized accessibility alongside power and aggression. The sound is polished, sleek, and refined, focused on radio-friendly appeal that dominated the era's rock charts. And it's true, those singles did, but you also had other amazing songs on there. Thank God for the Bomb, Killer of Giants. It was, and again, it didn't sound contrived. It didn't sound contrived. It seemed like the logical step after Bark at the Moon. And No Rest for the Wicked seemed like the logical step after The Ultimate Sin. So I think it was more of the aesthetic than it was the music itself. Aerosmith, Permanent Vacation, 1987, regarded as one of the most influential rock bands in the 1970s, an honor they've more than earned. Aerosmith ruled the airwaves with iconic albums such as Toys in the Attic and Rocks. Dream On, Walk This Way soared into the top 10, cementing the band's enduring legacy that still resonates almost 5 decades later. However, despite their early triumphs, the band faced a near-fatal collapse after the release of Rockin' a Hard Place in 1982. Internal conflicts and crippling substance abuse threatened to destroy everything that they had worked for. After making the decision to clean up and get sober, Aerosmith went on to release a record that would shoot them back into the stratosphere of rock greats. The release of Permanent Vacation in 1987 marked Aerosmith's triumphant return, propelling them back into the spotlight, establishing them as major players in the 1980s rock scene. With hits such as Dude Looks Like a Lady and Ragdoll, the band not only overcame their past struggles, but also redefined their sound, blending their classic rock roots with infectious energy of the era. Aerosmith's remarkable comeback proved, even in the face of adversity, they could still reign as one of rock's greatest bands, cementing their legacy for generations to come. Heart? Bad Animals? Really? Why wouldn't you go with the previous album? That I don't get. Okay, Heart, Bad Animals. By 1987, Heart were a rock staple, but this rise of glam metal demanded a shift. Bad Animals marked the band's embrace of the era's shiny radio-friendly sound. Again, this is another miss. I'm going to stop for a second. It was the previous album, the self-titled Heart. It had What About Love, These Dreams, Never, which, Holly Knight, she was the author of that. This is a miss. Heart and Bad Animals, those two albums, Heart are the sisters of Heart, Ann and Nancy, don't really embrace those albums. They look at it as a time where they were just like, they did anything to kind of stay relevant, because their previous album on their old label CBS, which was Passion Works, it just didn't go anywhere, and they kind of redesigned themselves for that era. But it wasn't Bad Animals. It was a previous album. Bad Animals marked the band's embrace of the era's shiny radio-friendly songs with big hooks, layered guitars, and slick production. Produced by Ron Nevison, the album spawned huge hits like Alone, a power ballad that fit right in the hair metal crowd. Visually, Heart leaned into the glam style with the bold outfits and makeup, and aligning themselves with the look of the time without fully abandoning their roots. Tracks such as Who Will You Run To balance catchy arena rock energy with the band's seasoned musicianship. While some fans might have questioned the shift, Bad Animals showed that Heart could evolve with the times, staying relevant while still retaining their unique sound. Bad Animals wasn't just a play for commercial success. It was a testament to Heart's ability to stay relevant, reinventing themselves while holding on to what made them unique. The album may have leaned into the hair metal zeitgeist, but it also solidified their place as one of the era's most enduring acts. Pantera, Metal Magic. This is going to be a weird one, I can tell you right now. Only Pantera's most diehard fans would know that long before they became one of metal's heaviest acts, they not only had a hair metal era, but started out as a hair metal band. We're not kidding, just check the promo photos. The band released 3 records in the mid-'80s, starting with arguably the best and possibly most ridiculous of them all, 1983's Metal Magic. Produced by Jerry Abbott, Diamond Vinny's father, who managed the band at the time, Metal Magic was recorded long before vocalist Phil Anselmo came into the mix. Terry Glaze, who was heavily indoctrinated in the glam metal scene at the time, handled vocal duties on this one, crooning on such songs as the Kiss-inspired Ride My Rocket, Tell Me If You Want It. Despite their alignment with the genre, Pantera's glam period was met with mixed reactions. While the band's musicianship was undeniable, they struggled to find a distinct identity within the oversaturated glam market. However, this era laid the foundation for the band's transformation as they began to distance themselves from the glam style in favor of a heavier, more aggressive sound. And it, to this day, which is amazing to me because the Abbott brothers are both deceased, they have 3 albums and an EP. One of those albums is an album called Power Metal, where Phil came into the band. They were still rocking the glam thing until the next album, which was Cowboys from Hell. They don't acknowledge those albums. You have to get them on the black market, repressing, Russian, whatever. But there's this entire catalog of music that they ignore, which would be, if they did it, if they took it over themselves because they own the rights, and started pressing them, it would be, with the Pantera fan base, it would be a license to print money. It really would. But for whatever reason, they want to just ignore those albums and, just stick with their Hot Topic, denim and dirt look that they started with Cowboys from Hell and pretend like they were never that way. And let me tell you something. I like Cowboys from Hell. I'm not the biggest fan of Vulgar Display of Power or really kind of anything that followed. But I really like Cowboys from Hell, but not as much as I like their previous independent release, Power Metal. Power Metal is fantastic, and the fact that that's not out there, and there are a ton of Pantera fans who would love to get their hands on it, especially if they did like an RSD release, and did it on vinyl, it would sell like hotcakes. Y&T Contagious. This is dead on, because Y&T shifted for Contagious. The look, not the sound. Y&T were still an amazing hard rock heavy metal band, and I will straight up tell you, Contagious and 10, my two favorite Y&T albums. Y&T Contagious, 1987, originally known as Yesterday and Today, Y&T were way ahead of the glam metal curve, paving the way for bands that would go on to become LA's biggest. Formed in the mid-1970s, Y&T got their start in the thriving Sunset Strip scene, famously tearing at the stage at the legendary Starwood Club, a hotspot that helped launch the careers of rock icons, including that little-known band called Van Halen. Though Y&T never saw massive commercial success that some of their peers would eventually enjoy, their relentless gigging and passionate fan base earned them the respect of the rock community. The band's earlier years were filled with consistent performances along the Strip, where they refined their sound and earned the loyalty of a dedicated following, building the foundation for a career that would eventually reach mainstream attention. By the time 1985's Down for the Count hit, Y&T had perfected the art of blending commercial appeal with their rock and roll roots, giving fans a mix of power ballads and hard-driving anthems that would go on to define the 80s. Though they may not have been the most commercially successful band of the era, their contributions to the sound and style of glam metal were undeniable. In many ways, Y&T were the architect of the genre's early days, influencing future stars while quietly building a legacy that would stand the test of time. And honestly, the song that really started it was pre-Contagious with Summertime Girls. That song is perfect 80s hard rock heavy metal, quote-unquote hair metal. It really is. I will see you in the next one. Take care. Later.